Well, I was out of my usual morning walk with my faithful companion, Buddy, in the park when I came across a woman named Eden, who was having trouble with her own dog. The woman had a bob cut and was wearing sunglasses that were so outdated. They almost seemed comical. However, my concern was directed towards her dog, a scruffy-looking terrier that appeared to be in poor health. It was constantly pulling at its leash, trying to escape, and its rib cage was practically visible, indicating that it was undernourished. I approached Eden to see if there was anything I could do to help, but she was not interested in talking about her dog's condition. Instead, she became fixated on Buddy's flashy toy and asked if she could have it for her own dog. I kindly declined, explaining that Buddy was very attached to the toy and I didn't want to upset it. Eden's response was not what I expected. She became increasingly agitated and even tried to grab the toy from Buddy's mouth. But Buddy was well trained and alert, and he took the toy out of her hand, injuring her in the process. I was shocked and disturbed by Eden's behavior towards her own dog, and now towards Buddy. I immediately took action and called the police, explaining the situation to them and requesting that they come to the park to investigate. While I waited for the police to arrive, I stayed with Eden and her dog, keeping them both safe and ensuring that no further harm was done. When the police arrived, they listened to my account of the event and carefully observed Eden's behavior towards her dog. Based on the evidence, they concluded that Eden was neglecting her pet and posed a danger to both her dog and other people in the park. They arrested her and took her into custody, while they arranged for the dog to be taken to a local animal shelter where it could receive proper care and attention. It was relieved that the situation had been resolved, but I was also left with a heavy heart, knowing that there are still many other animals out there who are suffering at the hands of neglectful or abusive owners. I made a vow to continue to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, and to work towards creating a world where all the animals are treated with love, respect, and dignity. From that day on, I made it a point to be more aware of my surroundings and take action when I saw any sign of animal cruelty, and I also started volunteering at local animal shelters, helping to care for and find homes for pets in need. I wanted to make a difference and help create a better world for all the animals. As for Eden, she was charged with animal cruelty and neglect and faced a long legal process. During the trial, witnesses came forward to testify about her behavior and the poor condition of her dog, further supporting the case against her. In the end, she was found guilty and was sentenced to a term in jail and ordered to pay a fine. The scruffy terrier that I had encountered in the park was nursed back to health and was eventually adopted by a loving family. It was heartwarming to see the transformation in the dog and to know that it had found a forever home where it was valued and cherished. That experience taught me the importance of taking a stand and speaking out against animal cruelty. We all have a responsibility to protect the innocent and to ensure that all living beings are treated with kindness. So my background is in public service, working directly for elected officials. As such, I have a lot of friends and contacts at the various levels of government I have worked in and worked with. The rental community we live in used to be decent, but 2 to 3 years ago, a very well-known individual with family in real estate purchased our community. Following that, services have steadily declined. Repairs and maintenance have been slower, hours cut, and so on. The same company even had to settle a lawsuit with the state for predatory behavior in another county. Well, after finally getting fed up with this place, my wife and I decided to move. While talking to some of our longtime neighbors about our upcoming move, some information came to my attention, namely that while our service requests have all been processed relatively quickly, theirs have often taken months. And while our rent renewal was about a $100 increase, theirs was going up $300, even though they have perfect credit, decent income, and have been there longer. I was already aware of another black neighbor having a large rent increase and was surprised when ours was less. And my neighbor went on to tell me that the reason one of our other black neighbors moved was that they were quoted a $700 per month rent increase. Odd. None of my white neighbors have been quoted huge increases, but all of my black neighbors I have talked to have been for comparable or worse units. Would be a shame if someone living here knew the state senator who chairs a committee in charge of landlord-tenant issues and was friends with the chair and vice chair's chiefs of staff. Wonder what would happen if I dropped them all a line, as well as county officials and folks in the AG's office. Not sure what will happen next, but even money says it won't be good for his rental company. I was married to a woman named Sarah, who I thought was a perfect partner for me. We had been together for 5 years and had a 2-year-old son together. But as time passed, I began to realize that Sarah was not the person I thought she was. She was entitled and believed that she was never responsible for any of her wrongdoings. It all started when our son bumped his head on the coffee table in the living room. Sarah immediately jumped to blame anyone and everyone else, but never once accepted that it was her own negligence that led to the accident. She claimed that the coffee table was too low, even though I had specifically bought it at her request. This pattern of behavior continued, and Sarah never took responsibility for any of her actions, and she would always find a way to blame someone else. Whether it was a babysitter, the cleaning lady, or even me, I was at my wit's end, and I knew that something had to change. One day, after yet another argument about Sarah's refusal to take responsibility for her actions, I decided that enough was enough. I couldn't continue to live with a person who was so self-absorbed and unwilling to change. So I made a difficult decision to file for divorce. The process was not easy. Sarah fought me every step of the way, refusing to admit that she was at fault for any of our problems. She was so entrenched in her entitled mindset that she couldn't see that her behavior was a root cause of our problems. During the divorce proceedings, I was constantly reminded of the person Sarah had become. She would show up to court dressed in designer clothes, with her hair and makeup perfectly done, as if to say, "Look at me, I'm perfect, and I've done nothing wrong." It was a stark contrast to the person I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But I was determined to see this through. For the sake of our son and for my own well-being, the court process was long and arduous. But eventually the judge granted me the divorce. Sarah was ordered to pay child support and was given limited visitation rights with our son. The aftermath of the divorce was not easy. I struggled with the guilt of leaving my son's mother and with the sadness of losing the person I had once loved. But as time passed, I realized that my decision was the right one. I saw a remarkable change in our son. He was happier, healthier, and seemed to be thriving without Sarah's constant negativity in his life. I was also able to start a new chapter in my life and find happiness again. But Sarah was not so lucky. She continued to live her entitled lifestyle, always blaming others for her problems and never once accepting that her own actions were to blame. She lost her friends and her job, and eventually she became a shell of the person she once was. Looking back on my marriage to Sarah, I realized that I was blinded by love and couldn't see the person she truly was. I was so focused on trying to make our relationship work that I didn't see the toll it was taking on me and on our son. But I'm grateful for the lessons I learned from my experience with Sarah. I learned that it's important to always stand up for what is right, even if it's difficult. And I learned that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the greatest growth and happiness. I may have lost my marriage to Sarah, but I gained a new perspective on life and on what truly matters. I am grateful for my son, who is the light of my life. This is something my husband was involved in while in high school, some 40 plus years ago. You'll notice that no actual damage was done by them. The principal in his high school was a jerk. He did everything from selectively enforcing school policy to attempting to confiscate the funds raised from the prom. Fortunately, the most influential booster club in the school stopped this to pay for new jackets for the football team. This first revenge instance he told me about was when a group of students decided to fertilize the grass selectively. My husband prepared the water-type extinguisher with 2 pounds of Epsom salts, then added the water and air pressurization. Then he handed it off to other conspirators. Then one day, or maybe night, they went and wrote things on a lawn with it. I will leave it to you to imagine what high schoolers would write in this instance. Within days of writing appeared as very green grass. Of course, the principal went to the cops and wanted someone arrested for malicious mischief. However, in that town, that was defined as a destruction of property, not benefiting the property even if only selectively. The principal had to arrange to have his entire lawn fertilized. The other revenge my husband told me about was much simpler. Someone took a few packets of sugar and poured it on the closed gas cap of the principal's car and sprinkled some on the ground below it. Next, the person carefully polished off the gas cap to make it seem someone had poured the sugar in a tank. When the principal saw it, of course, he assumed precisely that and got his tank and gas line purged for what was really nothing. Now that's not cheap. The students got away with it both times. Alas, I haven't been told about any other revenge they did, but I'm pretty sure there was some more. This happened to my partner and I a couple of years ago. We live in the UK, and in 2019 I got a really good job in a new city in the Midlands. After a few months of commuting, we decided to move closer as my partner could find a job easily. We booked several viewings with prices ranging from £600 to £1,200 per month. After serious consideration, we decided that the long-term goal was to buy a property. So we decided to go for the cheapest place in order to save money for the deposit later. Now, this house was in one of the roughest neighborhoods I have ever lived in. The streets were covered in rubbish, people would be shouting outside in the middle of the night, and police would be constantly passing by. You'd find needles in the park nearby and drunk/drugged people laying around all the time. As per the house, it was a wreck, but we knew what we were getting into. Just looking at the big picture of getting our own home, we agreed to move and pay the £600 deposit plus month's rent in advance. Landlord requested to keep his mail, didn't sign a contract. I know, but we were young and naive. Payment to be done in cash. Do not change the prepaid electricity meter, and so on. But he said there is no need to register for council tax because he'd cover it. In the UK, council tax is usually well over £100 per month, and it's normally the tenant who pays for it. This will be very important later. Moving day comes and the house is a mess, like a proper mess. The converted loft is full of rubbish. They left a bed behind, and when we moved it, there were years of Q-tips, rubbish, even underwear from the previous tenant. There was a thick layer of grease throughout the kitchen. I guess you get the picture. We took pictures, but later lost them when I changed phones and didn't do transfer of files. Another important detail is that in the year we lived there, the landlord went on holiday to Sri Lanka, Dubai, Australia, and somewhere else I cannot remember. Also drove a very expensive car. When he came to collect rent, he'd make comments like, "Oh yeah, I had a barbecue in my new jacuzzi," and so on. You'll know soon why this is important. Nearly 1 year passes and we find the shared ownership in a new development in a better area, which together with the amount of money we managed to save, we can afford. We get our mortgage and notify the landlord with 3 months' notice. I requested not to pay the last month and he could just keep the deposit, but he refused. About 1 week before moving out, I accidentally opened a letter from the council in his name. Before noticing the name in the letter, I realized it's a council tax bill. But it's not hundreds, not even tens of pounds per month. It's £40 something for the year. And notice that the reason for this is that he'd been awarded housing benefits for living alone in my rented house and being on low pay. Move-in day comes. Unlike how the house was when moving in, we cleaned the property upside down just to be told by the landlord that he's keeping the deposit due to the carpet being dirty and so on. Now, that did infuriate me as I had lost the move-in day pictures of the dirty house. I argued that the house was in a better state of maintenance than when we moved in, but to no avail. I need to mention that even losing the deposit, the money we saved in council tax still made it beneficial to us. But I'm a pity be word in. I was very much done with landlord maliciousness. The petty revenge. I called the city council and with my most innocent voice said that I've been living in a property for a year and just saw a council tax bill filled with benefits for my landlord and thought it was not okay. The previously monotonous voice of the person at the other side of the phone immediately lifted up in excitement and asked a lot more questions, then thanked me and we hung up. That was everything until recently we saw our former neighbors and apparently the landlord lost his benefits and was driving a much cheaper car and the house is currently for sale. I think the world is a bit better today. Many summers ago, I worked front desk at a regional headquarters of a multinational corporation. For a visitor to be granted entrance, they had to prove that A. they have an appointment, and B. they are who they claim to be. Now the first part was easy, no need to show us your email, just give us a name and we'd call that person to confirm. The second required some sort of ID though, driver's license, employee badge, something like that. Or your inviter would have to meet you out here and confirm to us in writing. Know that we didn't keep your document. We just needed to put down your name and take a real quick glance of your face and photo. Most of our visitors had no problem with the protocol. Some would voice their frustration but still comply. Well, not this special guy. He got aggressive and demanded an explanation about the need for an ID when he was standing right there. Couldn't seem to grasp it however we tried, and he got increasingly louder. He didn't want his inviter to meet him outside because this is wrong. Security was ready to see him out when he screamed at us to call the cops, because we needed to be arrested and taught a lesson on civil rights. Calls were made, cops came quickly and he went out in cuffs. Turned out they already had a warrant, just weren't in a hurry to get him. The icing on the cake was that he was here for a job interview. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.